The grand hall was filled with the rich and powerful, the kind of people who could buy anything they desired. But today, the air was heavy with anticipation, as the most sought-after item in the galaxy was about to be auctioned off. The auctioneer, a well-dressed alien with a smooth voice, stood in front of a large, raised platform. On it was a cage, but it wasn't just any cage. It was a cell designed for someone wild, someone untamable. Inside the cage, a young alien girl paced back and forth. Her skin was a shade of pale green, almost translucent in the harsh lights above. Her eyes, sharp and wild, flickered over the crowd, scanning each person as if she could sense their intentions. She was beautiful in an unsettling way, with sharp features and untamed hair that framed her face like a lion's mane. Her alien ears twitched nervously. Her hands gripped the bars of her cage. The crowd was silent, watching her every move. They knew who she was. She'd been the subject of rumors for weeks. The wild one, the girl who had been captured during a failed mission and was now being sold to the highest bidder. This is a rare opportunity, the auctioneer spoke, his voice smooth and practiced. A specimen unlike any other, strong, fierce, and full of spirit. She is the perfect prize for someone who desires both challenge and beauty. He looked down at the girl in the cage, whose eyes narrowed as she heard his words. Interested in being anyone's prize? Her whole existence had been a fight for survival, and that's all she knew. The first bid came in. A low number, but the crowd stayed quiet. The girl's eyes locked onto the bidder, and she gave a low growl. The man flinched, visibly startled by the intensity in her gaze. A few murmurs filled the room, but no one dared bid higher. The auctioneer smiled and glanced toward the girl, who was now standing still, her body tense. She hadn't made a move, but it was clear to anyone who had been watching her that she was no ordinary alien. She was something special. Dangerous, unpredictable, and perhaps that was why no one was ready to claim her just yet. The bids continued in slow, hesitant increments. The people in the room had all heard the stories. The last time she was in an auction, she had fought back so fiercely that the event had to be stopped, and several of the guards were injured.
Ow.
They weren't sure they could control her. She was unpredictable, wild. Then, just as the auctioneer was about to call for another round of bids, a voice cut through the silence. "I'll take her. Everything I have." The entire room froze. Everyone turned to look at the newcomer who had spoken. A human. He was standing at the back of the room, a simple man, dressed in common clothes that didn't match the wealth of the others. His face was calm, but his eyes were filled with something the others in the room didn't expect. Compassion. The auctioneer hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "Sir, this is a higher-risk purchase. Are you sure you want to? I'll pay it." "All," the human said, stepping forward into the spotlight. "I'll give you everything you ask. Just bring her to me," was a murmur from the crowd. A human? Buying her? The risk was beyond their comprehension, but the human stood firm. His presence was not as grand or rich as the others, but there was something in his determination that made them pause. The auctioneer was still unsure. "The bidding is not over, sir. You're willing to pay an extraordinary sum. But are you prepared for the challenge that comes with her?" The human gave a slight nod. "I'll handle it." There was a moment of silence before the auctioneer turned to the crowd. "Well then, it seems we have our winner." The crowd gasped. The man had done what no one else dared to do. The price he offered was enough to make the auctioneer smile, but it was the look in the human's eyes that made everyone else uneasy. He was different from the others. The girl in the cage had been silent through the entire exchange, but when the auctioneer signaled for her to be released, she let out a soft hiss. Her wild eyes moved from the human to the auctioneer, then back to the human again. She wasn't sure what to make of him, but something inside her told her this would not be an ordinary transaction. As she stepped out of the cage, the human's gaze never wavered. He didn't see a prize, a trophy, or an object. He saw a person, a being who had been through far too much. He saw the fear in her eyes, the pain in the way she moved, and for the first time the girl saw something different in the human's eyes. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't afraid of her. The auction had ended, but something new had. Begun. The room was quieter now, the chaos of the auction forgotten, as the human led the alien girl away from the platform. The cage had been unlocked, but the girl's eyes remained sharp, watching everyone who passed by. I've been a prisoner her entire life, but even now she was ready to fight. It was all she knew. The human didn't speak as he guided her through the halls of the auction house. His step steady, but the girl was restless. She pulled at the chain that still connected her wrist to his, a sign that she wasn't fully trusting. Yet, her movements were quick, jerking from side to side as if looking for an escape. But the human never reacted. He just walked, his eyes focused ahead. The auction house had been a maze of marble and glass, full of rich buyers and sellers, but now they were moving through the back halls. Past workers who gave curious glances at the two of them. No one stopped. The girl could feel the weight of the stairs on her back, but she refused to acknowledge it. She was used to being looked at, studied like an object. The price had been high, but it was nothing compared to the price of her freedom. She had never had a chance to be free. Her entire life had been spent being captured, sold, and used. And now, here she was with this human who was walking beside her like it was normal. His grip on her wrist was loose, as though he wasn't trying to control her, but that made her more suspicious. She had no reason to trust him. They reached a small room at the back of the building. It was plain, with a single window that looked out over the city. The girl paused, her senses tingling. She wanted to run, but something in the human's presence made her hesitate. She could tell he wasn't like the others who had bought her. Kind before, he wasn't looking at her as a prize. But that didn't mean she trusted him. The human spoke then, his voice calm and steady. "Yes. You're free to go if you want." She turned to him, her eyes flashing with confusion and anger. "What do you mean you bought me?" "I did," he said, "but I'm not going to keep you locked up. I'm not going to treat you like property." The girl took a step back. She didn't know what to make of this. She had been trained to fight for her life, to survive any way she could. But here, with him, she felt something different. She had never been treated like this before. "You want me to stay?" she asked, her voice low. "I want you to be safe," he replied. "I want you to have a chance at a life that's yours to live." She couldn't believe it. There had been no one before who had cared for her. No one had ever seen her as more than a tool, a weapon to be used. She had been sold again and again, and every time she had fought, she had run, only to end up back in the same situation. "I don't need your pity," she said harshly, looking away from him. "I'm not giving you pity," he said. "I just want to help." The girl was quiet for a long time, her gaze flicking over to the window again. The stars were visible in the distance, tiny points of light in the vastness of space. For the first time in her life, she felt the pull of something beyond the bars that had held her. The feeling was unfamiliar, but it was there. "I don't trust you," she said finally, her voice sharp. "I don't expect you to," he answered calmly. "Trust takes time, but I'm here to give you the chance to make that choice." Turned back to him, her eyes narrowing. "Why?" "Because everyone deserves a choice," he replied. "Even you." For a long moment, the girl stared at him, trying to understand what he meant. He wasn't like the other humans she had known. He wasn't greedy. He wasn't looking to take advantage of her. There was something about him that made her question everything she had ever believed. "You don't know what it's like," she muttered. "To be sold, to be caged." "I know," he said softly. "I know more than you think." She looked at him, her curiosity starting to outweigh her anger. There was something in his eyes, a deep sadness, maybe, or understanding that made her want to know more. But just as quickly she shook her head. No, she couldn't trust him. She couldn't let him get too close. "I don't want to be here," she said, her voice filled with frustration. "I understand," the human said, nodding. "But I'm not here to force you to do anything. I'm here to give you space, a place where you can decide what to do with your life." The girl's heart pounded in her chest. She had never been given space before. There had always been someone pulling her in one direction or another. But now, standing here in this small room, she felt the weight of her decision. For the first time, she didn't have to fight. She didn't have to run. She could stay if she wanted. She could walk out that door and never look back. But something, in her something small, fragile, wanted to stay. "I don't need you," she said, but it lacked conviction. "I'm not here to be needed," he replied. "I'm here to give you a chance to decide for yourself." She stood there for it, long time, staring at him. The weight of her past, her pain, her fear, everything she had ever known was still there. But it was starting to feel different. The walls around her weren't closing in. The cage wasn't there anymore. And for the first time, she felt like she might just have a chance. The next few hours passed in a blur for the girl. The human, her new owner, she reminded herself, had led her to a small room, not much larger than a closet, and left her alone for a while. The girl sat on the edge of a plain bed, her back against the wall, watching the door. She was still trying to process everything that had happened. She had been bought. No one had ever bought her with the intention of setting her free. They'd always treated her like a tool, an object to be used. But this man, this human, seemed different. He wasn't like the others. The door creaked open, and the human stepped inside, looking a little more tired than before. His eyes met hers, and he didn't say anything at first. Instead, he just stood there, taking her in. She didn't look away, her own eyes still full of suspicion. She couldn't trust him, not yet. "I'm sorry," he said, breaking the silence. "I didn't mean to throw you into all of this so suddenly. It's just, couldn't let you be sold again." The girl stiffened, a sharp edge to her voice. "What do you want from me?" The human looked down at the floor for a moment, his hands clasped in front of him. "I don't want anything from you, I just... I want to give you a choice." The girl's mind raced. A choice? What kind of choice could a human like him offer to someone like her? Someone who had been abused, captured, and sold as if she were nothing more than a piece of property? "You want to give me a choice?" she repeated bitterly. "I've had no choices in my life. None. And now you think you're going to change that." "I didn't say it would be easy," he said softly, his voice calm but steady. "But you're free to leave whenever you want. You're free to do whatever you choose. I won't force you to stay here." She stared at him, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He wasn't lying. She could see it in his eyes. He really meant what he said. But the fear and doubt inside her were too strong. She had never had this kind of freedom before. No one had ever treated her this way. She didn't know what to make of it. "I don't believe you," she said, her voice quiet but filled with tension. "You don't have to believe me now," he replied, "but I'm here to prove it to you. I'm not asking for anything in return. You don't owe me." Her eyes narrowed, distrust still in her gaze. "Then why did you buy me? Why not just let me go?" Hesitated, then answered, "I couldn't watch you be sold again. I didn't know what would happen to you. I've seen enough to know that you deserve better than this. I want to help you find something better." She felt a sharp pang in her chest. The girl turned her head, looking away from him, as though she could shut out his words. It wasn't that she didn't want to believe him. It was just too hard. Too many years of being hurt and used had built walls around her heart. And now, here was a human who was trying to break through them. But she didn't know how to let him. "You think just because you bought me, you can save me?" she muttered, her voice shaking. "You don't know what I've been through. You don't know what it's like." "I know it's been hard," he said quietly, his voice gentle. "But you don't have to go through it alone anymore." For a long moment, they just stared at each other, the silence thick with tension. The girl wanted to scream, to run, to escape, but something inside her, a small, quiet voice, was telling her to stay. Was it hope? Was it trust? Or was it just the exhaustion of fighting for so long? Finally, the girl stood up from the bed, her movements stiff but purposeful. She didn't know what she was doing, only that she needed to move, to do something. The human stepped back, giving her space, but his eyes followed her every move. "You've made your choice then?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying a hint of concern. The girl nodded slowly, turning toward the window. She could see the stars out there, the same stars she had seen when she was locked in the cage. But this time, they didn't seem so far away. "I don't trust you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'll stay, for now." Human let out a quiet breath, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. But he didn't celebrate, he didn't cheer, He simply nodded. I understand. You don't have to trust me, but I'll prove myself to you. For the first time, the girl felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't freedom, not yet. But it was something else, something she couldn't name. As the minutes passed, the human didn't push her. He simply sat down in a chair across from her, leaving her space. She didn't know how long she stood there, looking out into the stars. Her mind still racing with thoughts of doubt and fear. But one thing was clear. This was different. She wasn't trapped in a cage anymore. She wasn't owned by someone who saw her as nothing more than an object. For the first time in a long time, she was free to make her own choices. Even if she didn't know what to do with that freedom yet, she wasn't going to let it slip away. The days following the auction were quiet, but the air between the girl and the human was thick with unspoken thoughts. The human had kept his word. He didn't force her to do anything, didn't try to control her. And for that, the girl was, both relieved and confused. She spent most of her time alone, sitting by the window or wandering the small room she was given. She didn't trust this freedom, didn't understand it. Every part of her told her to leave, to run, to escape this strange human who seemed too good to be true. But every time she considered it, something stopped her. The human wasn't chasing her, wasn't ordering her around. He was patient, quiet, waiting for her to decide. In the evenings, he would come to check on her. He didn't speak much, just offered food or asked if she needed anything. The first time he had done that, she had been so shocked that she hadn't known how to answer. No one had ever asked her what she needed. No one had cared. Today, however, things felt different. The human had gone out, leaving her alone in the room. She could hear voices in the hallway, low murmurs that seemed to echo through the walls. It wasn't long before the door opened again, but this time, it wasn't the human who walked in. Two men, tall and dressed in dark suits, stood in the doorway, blocking her exit. "Where is he?" one of them asked, his voice deep and commanding. "We need to speak with him." The girl's body went rigid as she stood up from the bed. Didn't trust these men. They looked like the kind of people who didn't ask for permission, the kind of people who would take what they wanted, no matter who stood in their way. "I don't know where he is," she said, her voice sharp, trying to hold back the fear rising in her chest. The men exchanged a glance, then one of them stepped forward. "You don't understand. We've come for him. He made a deal, and we expect him to fulfill it." The girl's eyes narrowed. "What kind of deal?" "Don't worry about it," the other man said, his tone dismissive. "We just need him. He can't hide from us." The girl felt her heart race. She had heard of people like this, the kind of men who owned everything and expected everyone else to follow their rules. These men weren't here to offer her a choice. They were here to take something. She took a step back, moving toward the corner of the room, putting some space between herself and the men. "I don't know anything about this deal. But if you're looking for him, you'll have to wait until he gets back." The man who had spoken earlier stepped forward again. "We don't have time for that. We'll take you instead. You're still his property, after all." No. The words hit her like a punch in the gut. She wasn't just a person. To them, she was still something to be owned, something to be used, without thinking. The girl lunged for the nearest object, a small chair by the bed, and swung it at the men. One of them barely dodged it, but the other wasn't so lucky. He stumbled back, crashing into the doorframe. "Don't come near me," she spat, her breathing heavy. "I'm not anyone's property." The man who had been knocked back pushed himself up with a grunt, wiping blood from his lip. "You'll regret this," he growled. "You don't know who you're dealing with." The door slammed open behind them, and the human appeared, his eyes wide with shock as he took in the scene. He rushed forward, standing between the men and the girl. His expression was firm, his voice low but commanding. "Leave her alone," he said, his eyes locked onto the men. "You won't take her." The two men hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by the human's arrival. The girl could feel the tension arise, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The human was standing tall, his presence a shield between her and the men who wanted to take her. But she could see the fear in his eyes as well. He was not as calm as he appeared. "This is none of your business," one of the men said, sneering. We have a deal with her owner, and he is obligated to honor it. You're just some nobody. Step aside. Not stepping aside, the human replied, his voice colder now. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. For a long moment, the two men studied the human. Tension hung thick in the air. Finally, one of them spoke, his voice dripping with disdain. You have no idea who you're messing with. We'll be back for her. And when we come, there will be no mercy. With that, the men turned and left, leaving the human and the girl alone once more. The door clicked shut behind them, and the human exhaled sharply. The girl didn't move. She stood in the same spot, staring at the door, her body still tense from the encounter. She had never seen someone stand up for her like that, not even once. The human turned to her, his face softening. Are you okay? She didn't answer immediately. She was too confused, too shaken by the confrontation. She had never felt this. Before this strange mix of fear and something else. Maybe it was gratitude, but it felt different. It felt like something she hadn't experienced in years. I'm fine, she said finally, her voice a little more steady than before. But why did you help me? The human paused, his eyes searching hers. Because I promised I wouldn't let anyone hurt you. And I intend to keep that promise. The girl's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly pushed the feeling away. You don't have to do this. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything, he said softly. I promised you a life, and I meant it. For the first time since she had been taken from the auction, the girl felt something shift within her. It wasn't trust not yet, but it was something new. Something that made her believe, for the first time in her life, that maybe, just maybe, she could find peace. The days that followed the confrontation with the two men were filled with a quiet tension. The girl couldn't forget the way they had looked at her, like she was something to be taken, a piece of property that could be sold and traded at will. The feeling of being nothing more than an object stung even now, but it was different this time. The human had promised to protect her, and she had seen the way he stood up to the men who tried to take her. For the first time, she believed that someone actually cared. The human was quieter these days, too. He often disappeared for hours at a time, and when he returned, his face was tired, as if he had been thinking deeply about something. She didn't ask where he went or what he was doing. She knew that if she wanted to survive, she needed to trust him, at least for now. One afternoon, after the human had returned, he looked at her with a serious expression. We need to talk. The girl, who had been sitting near the window, stood up slowly. She was still cautious around him, but she was beginning to trust him more than she had with anyone else. She nodded, waiting for him to continue. I'm going to get you out of here, he said, his voice firm. I've been looking into it, and I think I can help you escape. She frowned, the idea of escaping stirring something deep inside her. She had been running her whole life, but this felt different. She wasn't sure if she could trust the human's plan. But something in her told her this was a chance she couldn't ignore. You want to help me leave? She asked, disbelief in her voice. He nodded. I've been looking for a way to get us both out of here without anyone noticing, and go somewhere safe, far away from the people who want to control you. The girl hesitated. The idea of freedom was both thrilling and terrifying. She had never been truly free. She had been sold, captured, and sold again. Running had always been her only choice, but now she had to make a decision. A real choice. For the first time, she wasn't just running to survive. She was running toward something, toward the possibility of a new life. What do you want from me? She asked, still unsure. You've done so much already. Why? I want you to have a chance at a life, he said, his voice quiet but sincere. You don't deserve to be a prisoner. No one does. The girl looked down at her hands, the chain still faintly visible in her memory. She had been locked up for so long that it was hard to imagine a life without walls. But the human had opened a door. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her wonder if freedom was something she could really have. What do I need to do? She asked, finally giving in to the idea of escape. The human smiled, a small encouraging smile. We'll leave tonight. I've arranged everything. Just be ready. She nodded, the decision made. But deep down, she felt a surge of fear. Could she really leave this place? Could she really trust the human? She wasn't sure, but she knew she couldn't stay here. Not after everything that had happened. That night, they moved quickly. The human had prepared everything, from the money to the fake identities. It was as if he had known exactly what he needed to do to get them out of the auction house and away. From the men who had come looking for her, the girl had never seen him act like this, focused, determined, and more than ready to fight for their freedom. They snuck through the back halls of the building, avoiding the guards who patrolled the corridors. The girl had never felt so alive. Every step they took felt like it could be their last, but there was also a sense of hope that she had never felt before. The human led her through a small door that opened into an alleyway behind the building. They moved quickly, but the girl could still hear the sounds of voices from the auction house. She glanced back nervously, but the human kept his hand on her shoulder, guiding her forward. "We're almost there," he said in a low voice, his tone reassuring. They reached a small, unmarked ship parked at the edge of the alley. It was nothing like the grand ships she had seen before, no luxurious designs or shining metal. It was small and unassuming, the kind of ship that wouldn't attract attention. "This is it," the human said, unlocking the door and motioning for her to climb aboard. "We'll be safe here. Just trust me." The girl hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure what to expect next, but she knew she couldn't turn back now. She climbed into the ship, sitting down in one of the seats, her eyes fixed on the human as he followed her inside and closed the door behind them. As the ship lifted off the ground, the girl looked out the small window. The city they had just left was growing smaller and smaller. She couldn't see the auction house anymore, and for the first time, she felt a small spark of hope. The human sat beside her, his face calm but focused. "We're free now," he said softly. The girl didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could ever fully trust the human. But as the ship flew into the vastness of space, leaving the past behind, she knew that she was finally on her own path. She was no longer a prisoner. She was free. For the first time in her life, she felt like she could breathe. The stars stretched out in front of them as the ship cruised through the quiet expanse of space. It was a peaceful sight, nothing but endless black with tiny points of light scattered across it. The girl leaned against the cool window, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened. She had escaped. Yes, but she hadn't fully let go of the fear that had been with her for so long. Beside her, the human was busy at the control panel, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the ship's instruments. She couldn't help but watch him. He wasn't like the others. He had shown her kindness, something she had never experienced before. But that kindness came with a question she didn't have the answer to. Could she trust him completely? Could she trust anyone again? "Are we going?" she asked, breaking the silence. The human turned his head toward her, a faint smile crossing his lips. "Somewhere far away? Somewhere no one can find us?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "And how do you know no one will find us?" He shrugged, his expression calm. "I've made sure of it. I have a place where we can start over, a place where no one knows us, where we can be free." The girl didn't respond right away. She had heard promises like that before, but they had always been lies. People had always promised her freedom, only to take it away when it suited them. This time, though, something felt different. She wasn't sure why, but she wanted to believe him. "I don't know what to do now," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never been free. Not really. I don't know how to live like this." The human looked at her with understanding in his eyes. "I know. I didn't expect you to know what to do right away. We'll figure it out. Together, you don't have to do it alone." She looked at him, searching his face for any hint of deceit, but all she saw was sincerity. He really meant it. He really wanted to help her. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to run. She didn't feel the weight of the chains that had always held her back. "I've never had anyone who cared," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I don't know how to handle this." The human reached over and placed a hand gently on hers. "You don't have to handle it alone anymore. I'm here. We're in this together." For a moment, the girl just stared at their hands, feeling the warmth of his touch. It was strange, this feeling of comfort, of safety. She had spent so long fighting, so long trying to survive, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything." The human squeezed her hand gently. "Don't have to thank me. You deserve this. Deserve a chance at something better." The ship flew through the darkness, heading toward a new life. The girl wasn't sure what to expect when they reached their destination. She didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid to face it. First time, she had hope. As the hours passed, the stars outside began to change. The ship was leaving the familiar space behind, traveling toward unknown worlds. The girl sat back in her seat, her mind still racing, but her heart a little lighter than before. "I never thought I would be free," she said, looking out at the stars. "Never thought it was possible." The human nodded, glancing at her. Briefly, "Freedom doesn't come easily. It takes time. But it's worth it." She smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Maybe I'll learn how to live with it. Maybe I'll learn how to be free."
Oh.
"You will," the human said confidently. "It's a new beginning for both of us. You don't have to live in the past anymore." As the ship continued its journey, the girl allowed herself to relax, to breathe for the first time in a long while. The fear that had followed her for years seemed distant now, fading as the ship carried her toward a new life. The girl didn't know what the future would bring. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone anymore. Together, they would face whatever came next. The human glanced at her once more, and this time, she didn't look away. There was still much to be done, many challenges ahead, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she was moving toward something good, something real. And as the stars stretched out before her, the girl realized that maybe, just maybe, she could have a future. A future that was hers to create, free from fear, free from chains, free from the past. The journey was far from over, but it was a journey she was ready to face.